So hello yet again, YouTube. Hello, hello, hello. It's me, hopefully not continuing the I only read the boring chapters part, because it sounds like you guys had quite the adventure in the last chapter. But you know what? It's now me, and we are inside. We're only going to do one chapter today, because I'm lisping really bad. I was able to get my bottom teeth in yesterday for a little while, but they need an adjustment. The bone spur has finally mostly healed, and I was like, I'll put them in. And then I was like, ooh, these are really, really tight. Not if I'm just wearing them for looks, but if I try to chew on them. And I was like, all right, well, I go back to the dentist in about a week and everything can just be adjusted then. Huzzah! And then hopefully I will stop lisping so much. It might not bother you. It bothers me. But anyway, we are back into book 2 of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and we are inside because it's currently raining. Aaron and I were outside working on the garden beds until it started dropping wet stuff on our heads. I would say how rude, but the better and more moist the soil is, the better it will be for it. Plus, we need to settle all the dirt that we put into the raised bed so that it can get more dirt put on top of it, probably. Anyway, we're going to be reading chapter 7 in book 2 of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by the great Jules Verne. And chapter 7 is titled A Vanished Continent. Oh, that sounds exciting. Maybe I get an exciting chapter. On the morning of the next day, the 19th of February, I saw the Canadian enter my room. I was expecting his visit. He looked disappointed. "Well, sir," he said to me. "Well, Ned, luck was against us yesterday." "Yes, that captain must stop at the very time we were going to escape from his vessel." "Yes, Ned. He had business with his banker." "His banker?" "Yes, or rather his bank. I mean by that this ocean, where his wealth is in greater safety than it would be in the coffers of a state." I then related to the Canadian the incident of the preceding evening, in the secret hope of making him wish not to leave the captain. But the only result of my account was an energetic regret expressed by Ned at not being able to take a walk on the Vigo battlefield on his own account. "But all is not over," he said. "It is only one harpoon throw lost. Another time we shall succeed, and this very evening if necessary." "What is the direction of the Nautilus?" I asked. "I don't know," said Ned. "Well, at noon we shall find our bearings." The Canadian returned to Conseil. As soon as I was dressed, I went into the saloon. The compass was not reassuring. The direction of the Nautilus was south-southwest. We were turning our backs on Europe. I waited impatiently for our bearings to be taken. Around 11:30 a.m., the reservoirs were emptied, and our apparatus went up to the surface of the ocean. I sprang to the platform. Ned beat me there. There was no land in sight. Nothing but the immense sea. A few sails on the horizon, doubtless those that go as far as the San Rouge in search of favorable winds for doubling the Cape of Good Hope. The weather was cloudy, and there was a gale spreading up. Ned, in a rage, attempted to pierce the misty horizon. He still hoped that behind the mist stretched the land he so much desired to see. At noon, the sun appeared for but an instant. The first officer took advantage of the gleam to take the altitude. Then, the sea becoming rougher, we went down again and the panel was closed. It was no use to dream of escaping now, And I leave Ned Land's anger to be imagined when I informed him of this situation. On my own account, I was not overwhelmed with grief. I felt relieved from a weight that was oppressing me, and I could calmly take up my habitual work once again. That night, around 11 p.m., I received the very unexpected visit of Captain Nemo. He asked me graciously if I felt fatigued from sitting up so late the night before, and I told him no. "Then, Monsieur Arnaud, I have a curious excursion to propose to you." "What is that, Captain?" I asked. "You have as yet only been on the sea bottom by day. Would you like to see it on a dark night?" "I would, very much." "It will be a fatiguing walk, I warn you. You will have to go far and climb a mountain. The roads are not well kept in repair." "What you're telling me makes me doubly curious. I'm ready." "Well then, we will go and put on our diving dress." When we reached the wardroom, I saw that neither my companions nor any of the crew were to follow us on our excursion. Captain Nemo had not even asked me if I wanted to take Ned or Conseil. In a few minutes, we had put on our apparatuses. They placed on our back the reservoirs full of air, but the lamps were not prepared, and I said so to the captain. "They would be of no use to us," he told me. I thought I hadn't heard him right, but I could not repeat my observation, for the captain's head had already disappeared into its metal covering. I finished harnessing myself and felt that someone placed an iron spiked stick in my hand, and a few moments later, after the usual maneuvers, we had set foot on the bottom of the Atlantic at a depth of 150 fathom. Midnight was approaching. The waters were in profound darkness, but Captain Nemo showed me a reddish point in the distance, a kind of large light shining about 2 miles away. What this fire was, with what it fed, why and how it burned in the liquid, I could not tell. But it lighted us dimly with its form, and I soon became accustomed to the peculiar darkness, and I understood, under the circumstances, how useless the lamps would be. I caught a glimpse of heaps of stone covered by thickets of seaweed. My foot often slipped upon this vicious carpet of seaweed, and without my stick I would have fallen several times. Turning, I could still see the white light of the Nautilus beginning to gleam far in the distance. The stones, of which I have just spoken, were heaped on the bottom of the ocean with a kind of regularity that I could not explain to myself. I perceived gigantic furrows which lost themselves in the distant darkness, the length of which escaped all valuation. Other peculiarities presented themselves that I did not really know how to account for. It seemed to me that my heavy leaden shoes were crushing a litter of bones that crackled with a dry noise. What then was this vast plain I was moving across? I would like to have questioned the captain, but his language by signs that allowed him to talk with his companions when they followed him was still utterly incomprehensible to me. In the meanwhile, the reddish light that guided us increased and inflamed the horizon. The presence of this fire under the sea excited my curiosity to the utmost. Was it some electrical effluence? Was I moving towards a natural phenomenon still unknown to the savants on the earth? Or, for this thought crossed my mind, did the hand of man have any part in this fire? Had man lighted this fire? Was I going to meet in this deep sea companions and friends of Captain Nemo living his same strange life, and who he was going to visit? All of these foolish and inadmissible ideas pursued me, And in that state of mind, ceaselessly excited by the marvels that passed before my eyes, I would not have been surprised to see at the bottom of the ocean one of the submarine towns that Captain Nemo dreamt of. Our road grew brighter and brighter. The light shined from the top of a mountain about 800 feet high, but what I perceived was only a reflection made by the crystal of the water. The fire, the source of this inexplicable light, was on the other side of the mountain. Amidst the stony paths that furrowed the bottom of the Atlantic, Captain Nemo went without hesitating. He knew the dark route. He had doubtless been there along it, and he would not get lost. I followed him with unshaken confidence. He appeared, while walking before me, like one of the sea genii, and I admired his tall stature like a black shadow on the luminous background of the horizon. It was now about 1 in the morning. We had reached the first slopes of the mountain, but the way up led through the difficult path of a vast thicket. Yes, a thicket of dead trees, leafless, sapless, mineralized under the action of the water, overtopped here and there by gigantic pines. The path were encumbered with seaweed and fucus. Fucus. We're going to call that fucus. Amongst which stormed a world of crustaceans. I went on, climbing over the rocks, leaping over the fallen trunks, breaking the sea creepers that balanced from one tree to another, startling fish that flew from branch to branch. Pressing on, I no longer felt any fatigue at all. I followed my guide, and he never grew fatigued. What a spectacle! How can I depict it? How describe the aspect of the woods and rocks in this liquid element? Their lower parts somber and wild, the upper colored with red tints in the light with which reverberated. We were climbing rocks which fell in enormous fragments directly after, with the noise of an avalanche. To the right and the left were deep, dark galleries where no sight was seen. Here opened vast clearings that seemed made by the hand of man, and I asked myself sometimes if some inhabitant of these submarine regions wasn't about to appear suddenly. But still, Captain Nemo climbed. 2 hours after having left the Nautilus, we had passed the trees, and 100 feet above our heads rose the summit of the mountain, the projection of which made a shadow on the brilliant irradiation of the opposite slope. A few petrified bushes were scattered hither and thither. The fish rose in shoals under our feet, like birds surprised in tall grass. The rocky mass was hollowed out into deep holes in which I could hear formidable noises. My blood froze when I perceived some enormous antenna barricading my path, or some frightful claw shutting up the noise in the dark cavities. Thousands of glowing points shined in the darkness. They were the eyes of giant lobsters settling themselves up like halberdiers and moving their claws with the clicking sound of metal. There were titanic crabs pointed like a cannon on their carriages, and frightful squid intertwining their tentacles like a living nest of serpents. But I couldn't stop. Captain Nemo, familiar with these terrible animals, paid no attention at all to them. We had arrived at the first plateau where other surprises were waiting. There rose picturesque ruins which betrayed the hand of man, and now that of the Creator as well. They were vast heaps of stones in the vague outlines of castles and temples, clothed in a world of zoophytes all in flower, and instead of ivy, seaweed clothed them with a vegetative mantle. But what then? What was this portion of the globe that had been swallowed by a cataclysm? Where was I? Where had Captain Nemo brought me? I would have liked to have questioned him. As I couldn't do that, I stopped him and seized his arm, but he, shaking his head and pointing to the last summit, seemed to tell me, "Higher, still higher." I followed with a last effort, and in a few minutes I had climbed the peak that overtopped for about 30 feet in all the rocky mass. I looked at the side we had climbed. The mountain only rose 700 or 800 feet above the plain, but on the opposite side it commanded from twice that height the depths of this portion of the Atlantic. My eyes wandered over a large space lighted up by a violent flashing. In fact, this mountain was a volcano. At 50 feet below the peak, amidst a rain of stones, a wide crater was vomiting forth torrents of lava which fell in a cascade of fire into the bosom of the liquid mass. Thus placed, the volcano, like a torch, lighted up the lower plain to the last limit of the horizon. And there, before my eyes, ruined, destroyed, overturned, appeared a town, its roofs crushed in, its temples overthrown, its arches dislocated, its columns lying on the ground. Further were the remains of a gigantic aqueduct, and over there some vestiges of a quay, as if some ancient port had formerly shattered on the shores of an extinct ocean, the merchant vessels and war trimines. Further still, long lines of ruined walls, wide deserted streets, a second Pompeii buried under the water, raised for me by Captain Nemo. Where was I? Where was I? I wished to know at any price. I felt I must speak, and I tried to take off the helmet. But Captain Nemo came and stopped me with a gesture. Then, picking up a piece of clayey stone, he went up to a black rock and wrote the single word, Atlantis. Why did time fail me? I would have liked to go descend the abrupt sides of this mountain and go over the whole of the immense continent that doubtless joined Africa to America, and to visit the cities. While I was still dreaming, trying to fix every detail of the scene in my memory, Captain Nemo, leaning against a moss-covered fragment of the ruin, remained motionless, as if petrified in mute ecstasy. Was he dreaming about the long-gone generations and asking them the secret of human destiny? Was it here that this strange man came to refresh his historical memory and live again that ancient existence, he who would not live in a modern one? What would I have not given to know his thoughts, to share and understand them? We remained in that spot for an entire hour, contemplating the plain in the light of the lava that sometimes was quite intense. The interior bubblings made rapid tremblings pass over the outside of the mountain, and deep noises, clearly transmitted by the liquid medium, were echoed with majestic amplitude. At that moment, the moon appeared for an instant through the mass of water and threw her pale rays over the engulfed continent. It was just a gleam, but the effect, indescribable. The captain rose, gave a last look at the plain, and then, with his hand, signaled me to follow. We quickly descended the mountain. When we had once passed the mineral forest, I could perceive the lantern of the Nautilus shining like a star. The captain walked straight to it, and we were back on board as the first light of dawn whitened the top of the ocean. And that is the end of the chapter. That was a good one. I finally got a good one. Yay! Oh, Atlantis. You know, it's funny. Atlantis probably doesn't exist. But there are so many Atlantises buried in the ocean that we could probably find tons of them. Kind of like, it's not really Atlantis, but they've been doing a lot of excavations in Doggerland, which is in the straits between England and France. And that was only submerged like a couple thousand years ago. And they're finding stuff there all the time. And I think that's very cool. Archaeology, one of my special interests. Anyway, that was a fantastic chapter. And Erin will be reading tomorrow's chapter, which sounds like it's a bit squicky. I was actually looking ahead into tomorrow's chapter, and it sounds a bit squicky. So he gets to read that one. It worked out really well. He'll make all sorts of ew faces. I don't usually read ahead, but every once in a while I flip through and I'm like, ooh, what is that? Mostly because tomorrow's chapter had a word that we've said a few times that I finally wanted to look up, and that is cachalot. And a cachalot is just an old word for a sperm whale. So look forward to that. But until then, I hope that you enjoyed this chapter as much as I did. I want to go find undersea things now, and we will see you tomorrow.